All right, why don't I call the meeting to order since we're running a little tiny bit late. Welcome everyone, all your tiny little faces. It's nice to see you all. I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. We have one continued public hearing this evening and several new public hearings, and we'll also do some additional business at the end of the meeting. So I want to say, in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts executive order suspending certain provisions of open meeting law, we are obviously conducting this meeting online. To ensure public access, the public may call through telephone and video conferencing. There will be a chance to ask questions and provide public comment on applications and discussions following the petitioner's presentation and questions from the commission. To do so, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with by now. If you're calling in, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. Our host, Heather, will mute microphones and may turn off video screens in order to preserve bandwidth, with the exception of the commissioners, the host, and the current petitioner. Pardon me. And finally, once the commission has acted on an application, the petitioner is free to leave the meeting. Once there are no public comments, actually, I would wait until after I ask for a motion to either continue, approve its conditions, or not approve. There'll be a second, and I'll do a roll call vote. And with that, I welcome you to the...
We do need a roll call to call the meeting.
Yes, October 15th, 2020 Historic Districts Commission meeting, and I'm going to do a roll call vote. Luis, I see you.
Present.
Paul.
Yes, present.
Nia.
Here.
Catherine.
Present.
Abigail.
Present.
Kate.
Here.
Dennis.
Present.
And Melinda.
Here.
Thank you all. And I think that's everybody. Did I get everybody, Heather? Yes. And I'm here too. So without any further song and dance on my part, why don't we go ahead and open our continued public hearing, which is 155 Monument Street. This is Ms. Gray is here with us.
Hello, Peter.
This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness to construct a new detached garage structure with site improvements, including paving and walkways, to repaint the house, replace existing doors, and lighting to match the new structure. So we have had a lot of activity on this application over the last several days, and I understand we have new drawings, which we saw this afternoon. So I think probably the best way to proceed is to see a presentation of the new material, both for the commission, in case people haven't had a chance to look at it. This came through this afternoon, and I think for the public too. So
excuse me, Peter.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, Peter. I would like to make a motion that we continue this hearing to our next meeting. I don't think it's fair on the commission or on the abutters to review materials that we only received 3 hours ago. I think preparation for these meetings takes a long time, and I certainly don't feel I have had sufficient time to review these materials.
Okay, Heather, let me ask you a question. What is our the actual deadline for submitting new material for a meeting?
We don't have an official deadline, but we always ask that it's generally by the Monday before a meeting.
Okay. Well,
Peter, I'd agree with Nia that I think, you know, we've been flexible because obviously we ask applicants to make changes and they work with architects and designers, and there's lead time built into that, and people have to pivot and change designs. But the afternoon of feels too close to allow us to make a really considered review of the application. And I have a concern, given the number of members of the public that have commented, that people haven't had a chance to review the plans that were submitted this afternoon.
Paul, you had a comment as well. Thank you, Abigail.
Yes, I don't disagree that substantively there is a basis for continuing. I wonder though whether it wouldn't be more productive to at least hear the presentation of the new plans, since there are, I'm guessing, a considerable number of people who are attending because of 155 Monument. And without perhaps getting into discussion about it, just that explanation may be helpful to everybody, the commission in particular, but certainly also the gathering.
Okay.
Following
thank you.
which, I would be in accord with the sense that we should probably continue it.
Dennis, did you have a comment?
I was going to say that was going to be my first question tonight. What do we do about material that's submitted a few hours before the meeting? I thought it was ludicrous. So of course I agree. I think Paul's comment is a good one, but I agree we can't take a vote on anything and really discuss it tonight without having. And I spent a good deal of time this afternoon looking at the buildings they told us we should look at Monument Street. Came home to find this new material. So I think it's very.
Me too. Me too.
All right, I think I'm sensing a trend here. So the question is it worth running through the material or not? I'm sort of frankly on the fence. I think it's all new to me as well.
There's
sorry?
a large number of commissioners here. There's a large number of the public, and the applicant's ready to present. Can we hear it and with the assumption that we're just going to continue it anyway?
Yes, we can. We could
But
do
if
that.
we hear the application, are we required to hear public comment as well?
Right.
Because I agree with Paul. I think it would be productive if we have a simple explanation of this is what was submitted this afternoon. These are the changes that have been made, and we simply move on from there. But my concern is that if we hear the application, then we do need to entertain public comment, and then we're kind of off to the races of considering it anyway, which is what I'd like to avoid doing given the lack of preparation I feel on my part.
Good question.
Yeah,
Heather,
I believe if we hear a presentation and open the public hearing to hear the presentation, then we would need to hear public comment.
Okay, well, that settles it for me then. I think we do have to continue this. It's too, Paul, were you going to say anything?
Well, yes, not to belabor this, we shouldn't waste the evening on this issue, but I think if the applicant would make the presentation, and if the public understands that they can forbear from making their comments until, in fact, we deliberate at the next meeting, I wouldn't be shocked if they exercised a certain amount of discretion and didn't say a whole lot tonight, even though they have a right to. So I'm still advancing the proposition that it's worth 10 or 15 minutes to understand what is now proposed and the ways in which it is different from what everyone has commented on. But I mean, obviously I'm in accord with the group's view on this.
Well, the problem is I can't see anybody. I can't poll the room because I'd love to turn around and say, would everybody be okay with that? But I'm looking at a bunch of little boxes here. So,
well, if I may say
yes,
the following, there are two issues over here: whether we're going to be able to make a decision tonight, which I don't think that categorically we cannot.
oh, I think you're on two devices.
What I'm saying. It's very weird.
You may have your computer microphone on as well. It's echoing.
Yeah, I'll just say that we will. I don't believe that we can make a decision tonight, but on the other hand, there are members of the public that have expressed their thoughts, and they need to be acknowledged. And also the applicant has a position to present, and I believe that needs to be acknowledged. And to the point that that we have to allow all the public to say what they have to say. Well, that unfortunately that's what we have to do, unless we curtail the process and we just in a sort of authoritative way continue the meeting for the next the application for the next meeting, which I don't think it's particularly helpful. So I believe that we have to hear one side, and maybe a member of the commission can acknowledge the majority of the letters that had been received in relation to this application, and then therefore avoid having to make each one of the letter senders have to speak by themselves.
Well, let me propose a hybrid solution, because I love to try to do this. What if we just ran through the material ourselves? So neither applicant nor public, everybody just watches us review it. We're gonna say we're continuing the application to our next meeting to actually have time to look at this, but we're not gonna. This is almost an additional business issue where it's not. Can we do that?
If
No,
we do
can't.
any sort of review, then it opens the public hearing, which opens public comment.
Yeah. And I think you're all right. It's not a good idea, I don't think, to have public comment on material that people have not seen. I mean, all the letters that have come in are commenting on the previous design, which has been changed as of this afternoon. So there hasn't been enough time for anybody, never mind us, to look at what's been presented in order to have time to respond to it. So, so I think I think as chair, I would say it makes more sense to just continue this hearing, because if we open it up, then I think, as one of you said, we may as well have the hearing, and that's not okay. Given how new this material is. So, did I just wave my chair wand? Did something happen just now? I think somebody has. I think I would look for a motion.
Well,
I've already made the motion.
Yeah, we're back
You
to
made the
Nia.
motion.
We need a second.
All right, so we need.
I second that we continue the application of 155 Monument Street to the next meeting of the Historic Districts Commission.
All right, we've had a motion and a second. All in favor? I'm going to go around the horn. Luis?
Aye.
Paul?
Yeah, more or less.
Yes, that's a yes. Nia made the motion.
Aye.
Yes. Catherine?
Aye.
Abigail?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
And Melinda?
Aye.
And by the way, the voting members tonight are, beside me, Luis, Nia, Melinda, and
Paul.
Full.
Paul. Yes, sorry. All right, so we've made that motion, and so we've continued this to the next meeting, and I do want to thank you all for showing up. I hope you can at least enjoy the rest of your evening now and go back and finish your dinner or something.
You can
But
watch.
I would encourage you all to look at the material that was posted. It's now on the website. It's called Modified Hardscape Plan. You can see it on the website. There are a number of letters of support and otherwise, and we will convene again in 2 weeks.
And yeah, the next meeting is November 5th.
That's right after Election Day, so there should be lots of excitement in the air at that time.
It's not 2 weeks.
It's 3
November.
weeks.
It's 3 weeks.
So,
Okay.
some of us may have committed suicide, but that's okay.
No suicides. We're going to hold this country together no matter what.
I agree.
Ms. Gray, I apologize. And for all the folks who showed up for this, I do apologize. We have to postpone this, but I hope you understand our reasoning.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay.
And thank you, Commission, for your collective wisdom there. All right. So moving right along, that was our continuance. We now have 36 Main Street, which is in the Main Street Historic District. This is a certificate of appropriateness application to rebuild some chimneys. Thank God Abigail's here. Remove some chimney caps, repair side entry doors, replace glass and handle set, replace windows and screens. Thank God
Here it
Dennis
is now.
here. And remove storm windows. So,
So sorry, Peter. So
yes.
despite
right
my
nearby?
affinity for chimneys,
Yes.
I think it's not 36 Main Street, it's 363.
Oops, sorry, I'm reading.
So I'm technically an abutter. So I'm going to recuse myself from.
Okay, well, we're going to channel your concern about
I
chimneys.
trust you all to
Thank you.
live up to my love of chimneys. So I will mute and video off myself.
Thank you. All right, so, and I see the Jennifer Smith, I see there you are. And all right, so I've looked at the material, but why don't we look at it again? Heather, is that easy to put up on the share screen?
Yeah, and hi everyone. So I'm Jennifer. This is my husband Michael.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Welcome.
We also have Halsley Platt on with us from Platt's Builders, who's been helping us. We've also been working with John Battle just to get some view as to, our goal is obviously to keep the historic look of our property. So there are 3 specific items we would like to address this evening. One is the chimney. So we have 2 chimneys on our property. This is our house. For those that don't know it, it's at the intersection of Elm and Main. If you're driving out of town, it's on the left. We have 2 chimneys. Both of the chimneys are actually leaning right now. They're not usable. They haven't been lined. And as we go into the winter, we started looking at lining them. And then we had Berquist, who's a specialist restoration company with Platt, come look at them. One of the main problems is also that the construction of these, if you look closely, it doesn't, they haven't used original brickwork. So there's varying different types of brick being used, from both some original and some from the 19th century. So actually what we would like to do is to actually tear both chimneys down, take the caps off, and rebuild them, restoring them with original brick. So they will be exactly the same height, but they will be straight and they will be functional, and they will actually be more in keeping with the age of the house.
All right, thank you. I see they're doing this, they're sort of smiling. It's like,
right,
or something. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's our chimney situation. How about the windows?
Oh, actually, can we do the side door second? If you could just stop there, Heather. So at the side of the house, this is the side door right here. This is an original door. If you look closely, both glass panels on the door are different. So at one point, we bought the house last year. We've owned the house for just over a year. So at some point, a panel has been replaced. So one has got original edged glass and one has no edged glass. What we would like to do is restore this door. Restoring it means we would make both sets of glass the same to look that historic look. But we do need to do some sealing around the door. It won't actually close without locking it from the inside. So it's actually not really functional, and it's letting in a lot of air. So we want to be able to seal it and restore it and then replace the glass. So they're both etched glass.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the look would actually be better than it is right now. And then the main item then is the windows. So we have original windows with storms around the house. So we have 3 main problems with the windows. The first one is ventilation. So because they're original screens, they actually don't open. So we have no way of opening the windows or ventilating them. The second is safety. When we've looked into these windows, a lot of the actual original weights have been removed, and there's been like a rubber surround. Oh, somebody might need to go.
Let me just interrupt you for a sec. I think one of the commissioners has 2 microphones on. Maybe if you'd all just mute yourselves, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so the weights have been removed, and there is like a false rubber surround, which means you can open the window, but there's nothing keeping the window open. So we are concerned about safety. We have 2 young children. It could almost be like a guillotine. If you open them, there's nothing keeping them up. They can kind of just fall back down. So we have ventilation, safety, and then another concern, having lived through the house through a winter now, the 2 front rooms on the main porch, the draft and the lack of insulation through there is particularly bad. We really struggle to get above 60. And so, we're really heating this house. And then on the second floor, it's more of just the noise, because they're original from the intersection of the Elm and Main, and the noise of vehicles. So What we would like to do is replace all the windows in the house with a Marvin historic looking replacement. We included in our submission the tear sheets. We've been really working closely with John Battle and Platt on what that would look like. We've had Marvin round. We also submitted some just what they look like. The other thing that we've been working really hard on is to make sure that what we replace them with looks exactly the same from a size point of view. So we've gone through various different options of what we could replace them with, because we want to make sure that the size of the window stays true. So we're not altering the look of the house in any way, but it would mean replacing those windows, removing the storms and not having the storms. The storms are very flat. The storms don't actually, I think they deter from what the look of the house should be. They're kind of those original. Horsley, I don't know if you have any additional comments to make that would be slightly more informed than my knowledge of windows.
I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that the commission has about the submission, sure.
Okay. I think, and that's really the application. So windows, chimneys and the side.
This side door, yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we've got a pretty good idea now. I'm assuming commissioners look through the photos. I think we've got a pretty good idea of what we're up against. Okay, so why don't let's talk about one thing at a time. I'd like to take the easy one first, the side door. I'm going to assume there's absolutely no objection to restoring that side door, as long as the art glass, the bevel glass matches. Is there any discussion? Does anybody really have anything to offer on that? I guess if you would unmute yourselves. Dennis.
I just had a clarification. Your plan is to keep the original pane and replace the one that's a replacement and have it etched to match, correct?
Correct.
Okay. At first I thought you were removing both panes, that you're only removing the bogus one and putting one that kind of matches the one on the other side.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll have to, and Hall to jump in, we'll have to obviously work on getting an identical pane and etching. And if we have a problem with that, we would come back to you with a similar drawing if that wasn't possible, something that is a replica of that, obviously, but that's our intention.
I have no problem as long as you're attempting to make it look like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be, in my mind, exact as long as it's close.
Yeah, exactly. We want to keep it looking like a Victorian house.
Good, good.
Okay.
Great idea.
Well, let me just go around real quick, just to be fair. Luis, any thoughts about the door?
No real thoughts. I see the work on the door as a replacement in kind.
Paul, thank you, sir.
No, no questions.
Nia? Sorry, you're...
No questions.
Kate?
No questions, replacement in kind.
Okay, Catherine?
No, I respect the idea of bringing it back to
Linda?
original.
Melinda, you're okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
Great. Okay, so chimneys. Well, let's go around the horn before I say anything. Luis, any comment on the chimney idea?
Just a quick question. Are the caps that are currently on the chimney going to be replaced, or is there another technology that will allow to accomplish the same function without the presence of the caps?
We are planning to not have the stainless steel caps when we're done.
Okay, good. I have no objection to the work on the chimney.
Thank you, sir. Paul, any objection, comments? Oh, you're muted. Sorry. You can all unmute yourselves, commissioners.
Another chimney question. What prevents the downdraft then? If you're removing the caps, is there some other device that's being used to prevent downdraft? I presume that's why the caps are there in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know exactly why the caps were put on, but
Okay.
Yes, we can certainly put flue top dampers that are then not visible from the street, but the stainless steel cap is a little obtrusive.
Understood. Yeah. I mean, if there's no caps, I have no question.
All right, Nia.
I have to say, I feel Abby's eyes boring into me from afar. But I think the restoration of the chimneys sounds just fine if you're going to restore them as they should be, and with the appropriate brick. I'm all in favor.
All right, thank you. Kate, any thoughts?
No, actually, I had this same work done by the same exact person. David Bergwitz does fantastic work. He's definitely the go-to guy for this sort of thing. And I think it'll look terrific.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another happy customer.
That's
Peter.
right.
Catherine, any thoughts?
I'm all in favor of the restoration work. It sounds good.
Okay, Dennis, chimney,
No question. Sounds great.
and Melinda.
I have no objections.
Okay, great. All right,
Peter,
so-
one clarification.
yes.
So looking at the side view right above the side door,
Let's see if we can put that back up on the screen there. Yeah.
up
Oop.
right there. So David's assessment of the chimney was that the lower corbelling was actually the original height of the chimney, and it was then simply added on to.
Mhm.
Now, right, to meet code, that lower chimney height is not appropriate, but
Right.
I just want to be clear, the plan is to actually eliminate that lower band and just have the corbelling up at the top where it normally would be.
Well, you know, normally I'd say that's a charming mistake, but in this case, now that you pointed it out, it looks a little wacky. Because actually the chimney, the part that's been added is the part that's tilting. So
Right.
I don't object to that. Does anybody else have any observation about that? I don't. I think it makes sense. You know,
No, I'm
go
glad
ahead.
to know it for the record, you know, that,
Yeah.
but it doesn't meet code, so. you
Well,
know,
also,
that-
this would be like one of those state historic preservation decisions to like rebuild the mistake accurately so that we can preserve it for all eternity. That doesn't make any sense. All right, so I think we're all in agreement on the chimney. So let's move to the windows. And really the discussion, just to cut to the chase, the discussion we typically have about windows is we prefer people to restore rather than replace, understanding all of the issues. Maybe I'll just start off by asking you all, is there any way to restore these windows rather than replace them? Have you explored that option? I'm asking the applicant, sorry.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
So Halsey here.
Halsey, okay.
So it looks to me like that has been attempted in the past with the triple track storm windows and then the installation of the vinyl liners on the interior as a pressure strip to hold them up. But with the sort of variety of issues between the drafts, the noise, the not being able to currently ventilate them, it seems to me that this is a situation where it is more appropriate to just upgrade them. If we flip a couple of more photos along, they're on the opposite side. This is the east side. If we flip to the west side photo, there was a bay that was built. Next photo, there we go. So that bay on the right was added sometime in the 1980s, I believe. There's a concrete poured foundation, and they did a nice job matching the details, but those then are, much newer, either Norco or Marvin window. Those are the old energy panels on the individual sash. And so I do think it is time to replace the windows as opposed to try once again to restore them.
And do we know, are the windows original to the house, the rest of the windows, or?
I believe that the remainder are, not that bay, but that the remainder are.
Okay, well, so I just thought I'd ask the question, but let's hear from the commission. Let's start with Luis, since you're first on my screen. Luis, thoughts about the window?
I wish I had been the last, but windows are.
Put you out of order.
Windows put you out of order.
I think your microphone is echoing.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Microphone is. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Can you bypass me for a second?
Yes,
until I
I'll,
fix the problem?
we'll skip you.
Yes,
But you have to mute your various microphones. All right, so Paul.
various microphones. All right, so Paul.
Yeah, I think trying to restore the windows based on some experience is not going to be fruitful. And so I don't have any problem with replacement that is as nearly historically comparable as possible with Marvin or equal.
Okay. Nia, may I ask for?
Nia.
We're getting a playback.
Here we are. I would, Peter, I would like to defer to Dennis on this. Dennis has always been the window Nazi of the group, and he, I feel, has the most knowledge about these original windows, and so I will leave him to make comments.
All right, well, let me just go around in the order I've got here. Kate, any thoughts about?
I was going to say I'd like to go after Dennis.
Oh gosh, all right. Should we skip right to Dennis? Dennis.
Go right to Dennis. I would like a little more information. You know,
Okay.
if I have to say something besides ask Dennis, I would like a little more information about, you know, what, you know, the state of the windows that are already there and that sort of thing. But
I stopped by the house. If you saw a trespasser walking around your house, it was me this afternoon. I was amazed at the condition of the windows. They've been beautifully cared for as far as the exterior is.
Well, we painted them last year. We painted the whole house. So we had them, we thought they would be fine if we painted them because we hadn't lived in them. So that's why they look so good right now.
Like wonderful. I would agree with you that the storms do not add anything to them whatsoever. The storms detract from it. But I do know from research that original windows, in your case, you've not described any rot or anything particularly wrong with the windows. You're describing the mechanism of the windows. And the weights dropping out, it's just a common occurrence. I mean, that happens with the windows all the time, particularly those that are hung on clothesline, or I call it clothesline anyway, for the weights. So I'm not opposed to replacing the windows, but I am opposed to replacing them unless you go one more step. And that is to find a consultant to talk with you about how to see if there's a way of meeting your needs. And I know there's silent needs as well as other needs before you replace the windows. So I think research has shown that it's actually cheaper to upgrade windows than it is to replace them, and that it actually may save you money and produce a window that they also say can be actually better than newer windows. And this takes into account how to deal with the storms. So I would suggest that you, and I don't know if Heather has names that we've collected over time, but there are window experts out there that can take a look at your windows and tell you whether they can be meet your needs or not. And I suggest that as the first step, since they're all original other than that bay, that's pretty amazing to have them. And I think the house is do that at least to see if there's a way to save them.
Yeah, be happy to take any further. Obviously, we had Horsley and we had Marvin and we had you know, John Battle, who I think's done a lot of work on historic houses as well, in, you know, how to in advice that he gave. But I'm happy to take another recommendation and have somebody else look at it.
Dennis, Halsey Platt here. So yeah, Jennifer and Mike asked me to come in to, I think, be that window consultant, and I am certainly, you know, I do not have, you know, preservation credentials, but have been working in Concord for now 30 years, you know, doing exactly this sort of work. And in this case, so I absolutely believe the science that the double hung sash, well cared for, and the storm, you know, can perform similarly to a new insulated glass panel. I think the issue here is about the air sealing around, and what Jennifer and Mike, you know, are considering is removing the existing windows, putting in a full new construction window from the exterior so that we can then air seal to both cut down on the heat loss, obviously the drafts, but also significantly the noise, right? We built a house on the other side of town a couple of years ago, and we built a music studio in there and learned an enormous amount about how noise travels. And given that they're right at the intersection there of Elm Street and Main Street, right, they got all sorts of stopping and starting. And so I think if we simply restore the windows, that's going to do little for the draft sealing, little for the noise transmission. And so, I think, Jennifer and Mike have done that, although I would not claim to be a restoration consultant.
Yeah, I think that you need, I still think you need to meet with someone who's really worked on windows professionally and does this as a means of making a living and knows how to deal with this. Again, I'm not opposed to the replacement. I just hate having the replacement done until we fully looked at how to save those windows. And there may be compromises. If I'm hearing correctly, there are major noise problems from the train and back. Is it more of a noise problem in back than in front?
No, it's actually not. But you wouldn't believe it. The train is actually not an issue for us. It's not as noisy. The noise is really off of, it's not really Main Street. It's because there's a junction right in front of our house from Elm to Main. And so it's that the stop and then the start creates a lot, and the master bedroom and our son's bedroom on the front of the house. So that's what, that creates that extra noise.
Again, I would recommend going a step further and just meeting with someone who's an expert in these windows, and then come back to us. And I will certainly, if your needs can't be met, the air is going to be a problem, the noise is going to be a problem, then I think we should rethink this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. If somebody could give us the contact, then we'd appreciate that.
Okay, we may have to follow up with you afterwards.
Great.
I do.
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't mean to skip over. Catherine, did you have any thoughts?
Just that I agree that it would be a good idea, I think, to just investigate a little further. But in essence, I think if the draft and air sealing issues cannot be adequately resolved with restoration of the original windows, then I have no real problem with the replacements as specified.
Okay. Thank you. And Melinda, did you have any?
And I agree with Dennis. I mean, I think the safety factor right now with the fact that these windows can't be held up scares me. But if you get new ropes and whatnot, I suppose that will be fixed. But otherwise, I don't really have a strong opinion either way.
Okay, and the last thing I'll say is that we work with these kinds of things all the time. I hope you understand. And we've gone through this. I've gone through this in Boston a number of times. The exterior appearance is one driver, but it's more important to have insulated glass and the functioning mechanisms. So if somebody can look at these and tell you if it's even worth the effort. If it turns out taking them apart and putting them back together is either going to destroy the window or not even achieve the basic needs, then I think you're getting the sense that we're not opposed in principle to replacing. We just would like to have that one last effort.
Sure, understand. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Lewis, I think, did you have a?
Luis, were you going to say anything?
Yeah, I hope that my audio problems had been fixed. But, I just want to make some observations. You see, the contribution that an original window makes to this house is minimal. No one's going to be able to tell whether the window that is there, it's original or not. On the other hand, from the perspective of the homeowner, there's no question, and with all due respect to Dennis, that a brand new construction window is substantially more efficient than a window that has been restored. So I believe that the contribution of original windows as a matter of principle to this compound, to this dwelling, to this house, is minimal. So I would vote that we approve the application of the applicant with the windows as stated, with new constructions windows that will have, from an aesthetical standpoint, exactly the same look as the windows that are historical, that are currently there, and that will provide some substantial benefits in terms of safety, insulation, security, and predictability that new windows afford.
All right, thank you. And I hear you. Let me ask the homeowner, is there the safety factor, not that it's not important, safety aside, is there a deadline? Are you trying to get this done before the winter?
I mean, ideally, we would love to do that because, you know, that it's the winter that poses more of the problem, the noises, yep. But you know, we will do what we have to do. If you know, the lead time is such that you know, we're happy to get that. We probably wouldn't get it done this winter if we go longer. But you know, understand if that's what we need to do.
Well, that sort of puts us in a pickle because I do understand safety and energy and noise issues.
Peter, I'd like to make one correction. Research has shown that restored windows can be actually better at keeping heat in and providing the same kinds of things that you look to new windows for. I know that sounds impossible, but that's what research has shown. And it depends on the window, depends on the situation, but you don't automatically, I don't think you should automatically fall into the idea that new windows are better than old windows restored and retrofitted.
Well, I just want to make an observation, which is that I respect very much Dennis's knowledge and opinion. And the argument that he's making, I have heard many, many, many times, but I have never seen anything to substantiate it. So I believe that it is entirely appropriate that we made available to all the members of the Historic Districts Commission the arguments that, or the proof that makes this argument valid, because I have no question that it's valid. But there may be some caveats, or there may be some circumstances, and for us knowing what the arguments are would be appropriate, because, you know, I'm in the process of considering replacing windows, and the amount of variety and information that you have to process is substantial. So I think that we should be able to make that judgment from ourselves, and so we will not have to rely on the respected word of one of the commissioners.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I realize, are these windows planning to have screens?
We are, Halsey here, we are planning to have half screens.
Half screens on the lower sash?
Exactly. Yep, so they would be lower,
okay.
Lower screens.
I mean, this house has obviously evolved through time, because the storm windows alone significantly changed the exterior appearance of the house, as much of a nightmare as they are to work with. And those come off every spring. Is that how it happens?
No, they don't.
Okay.
They just stay on.
Yeah, and Peter, in this case, when Jennifer and Mike bought the house, the screens, right, are no longer on any of the storm windows, and so, you know, they can open them, but, you know, then they've just got mosquitoes coming in. And I would say, so, you know, if we have to go get a window expert, you know, we can go down that road. I would assume, right, that we will not be able to then get back to you guys by the next meeting, and so that'll then push us out a month, which, yes, means that we are unlikely to be able to get this done before winter for Jennifer and Mike.
Yeah, and I guess I would say, as the chair, I mean, Dennis, I understand your concerns, and I also, you know, I'm an architect myself, having been through this drill a number of times. The reality is, a restored window often requires interior storms or additional reworking. it's a tricky call. It's a tricky call because the new profiles on these Marvin units they're essentially matches, other than the fact that they're insulated glass units. So I'm on the horns of a dilemma myself.
Paul's got something to say.
Yes, Paul. Sorry, I'm looking at the other screen.
Maybe this is splitting the baby, but it seems to me that it's undesirable that we micromanage the homeowner's choice between a restored window satisfactory to them and a replacement window. So my suggestion is that to the extent we decide to approve, that we approve subject to the homeowners getting some consultation at a level at their discretion, but that ultimately they can choose either to replace or to restore, and that we let it go at that and not hold this up for a couple of months or sort of micromanage, or I should say balance, whether the restorative window is equal to or almost equal to a new window. I just think we're gilding the lily here.
I actually think it's an excellent suggestion, Counselor. Dennis, what do you think about that? I actually think that's a good idea. That we.
I would like to see the report of the consultant.
Okay.
But I'm not opposed to that.
Luis, do you have one last?
I agree with Paul, but I don't think that we are allowed to make such decision. I think that the applicant is allowed to, or it's expected to make a proposition. We're supposed to approve it or reject it. And the applicant has made a proposition, and I think that it will be up to the applicant with the encouragement of the Historic Districts Commission entirely outside of the approval or disapproval process to find additional consultants to preserve the windows. And if that's the case, then and the application had been approved, then he could come back to us and say that instead of replacing the windows, he's going to restore some of them and so forth, and then we will be gladly take it over and most likely approve it, etc. So I don't think that that we can do what Paul is suggesting.
Well, actually, we can approve with conditions, so we can just do that.
Yeah, Peter, I would say if we do that, though, we'll end up in the same delay, because that means we then need to get the consultant out. We need to get a report written and then make a decision. So I'm assuming that has a similar schedule impact for what that's worth.
Yeah, I do see that too.
Peter?
Yes.
Having listened to all the various arguments, I feel that the applicant has already consulted with a number of people who are in a position to be well educated on the subject, and I would suggest we let them go ahead.
Okay.
Can I make a motion?
Hang on a sec. Have I not heard from anybody? Melinda, do you have any? I just want to make sure we hear from everyone.
I agree with Nia.
Okay, and Catherine, thank you, Melinda.
I also agree with Nia.
I think we're probably ready for a motion. Nia, do you want to make a motion? Or wait, I have to ask for public comment, correct? Has everyone spoken mostly what you want to say on the commission? You can wave at me if you have more to say. You can wave at me. All right, let's assume we've all said what we need to say. So I am going to open this up to public comment, and somebody's microphone is echoing again there. Let's see, 363 Main Street. This is to rebuild chimneys, remove the chimney caps, repair the side entry door with hardware, and replace windows and screens and remove storm windows. Is there any public comment on this application? And this is a big group, so I'm going to look around.
Just a reminder, if you have public comment, you can either unmute yourself, start your video, or use the raise hand function.
And let's look through the screens here. This is so awkward. All right, I don't see any. Heather, did you see any call in? All right. I would look for a motion. One thing I would observe just as a chair and a window nudge myself is that if these windows are replaced, that any storm screens, I believe Marvin or any of these companies has the invisible mesh, not black screens, which tend to look like
Correct.
big.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that be
Wait,
included.
aren't we going to see then what, I mean, will the Smiths come back? It's Kate, to show us the material? I mean, it's, you know,
It's actually, I did supply that in the documentation.
Oh, is the screen in there too? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Screen's in there too.
Actually, was the screen, Horsley, I don't know if there was a picture of the half screen. Actually, it's just the window.
Jennifer, I think you're right. We did not supply information on the screens, but yes, happy to use Marvin's high transparency screen.
Okay, great.
And
That's what,
you just
sorry,
do
I forgot the term.
Yeah, we can make that a condition.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think you've heard our opinions, and I think we understand the dilemma. So why don't I look for a motion from the commission?
I move that we approve the application for 363 Main Street to rebuild chimneys and remove chimney caps, repair the side entry door and replace glass and handle set, replace windows and screens, and remove storm windows with the understanding that the screens will be the clear invisible type.
And Luis seconds silently. And I will go around and take a vote. Now let me ask voting members first. Luis?
Aye.
Paul?
Yes.
Yes. Nia?
Aye.
Melinda?
Aye.
And I also approve, but let's, Dennis. Oh, I can't hear you. Probably.
I thought I didn't have a vote.
No, you vote. I just vote for record.
Well,
I oppose.
it doesn't count,
You
but
oppose. Okay, Catherine
Aye.
and Kate.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So you are approved. You've heard our discussion. So thank you for being so careful with the renovation and for coming before us with such a complete application. We do appreciate that, and that you're caring for this home so well, and we wish you luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Beautiful house.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see now. Moving right along. 126 Lowell Road. This is Main Street District, Concord Lumber. This is to replace some fencing, I believe, in the yard. This is remove and replace existing green chain link fence gates and pressure treated posts. And if we could see that application, somebody from Concord Lumber is here. And
I am here. I'm Jonathan Peckham. I'm the manager here.
Hi, Jonathan. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's see if Heather can put the application up. We'll just, if you would walk us through it, that would be great. And welcome back,
Sure.
Kate. Abigail. Sorry.
Thank you. Good job, guys.
Thank you for having me. So our plan is to try to continue to make some incremental property improvements here. One of which we've had fencing in this rear yard that has gone into really significant disrepair. We've torn most of it down because it was unsightly and it didn't look presentable to the neighborhood. So we originally, on the back side, I guess, that would be facing east towards Monument Street, there was a fence there. That's no longer there, and we're not currently going to replace that. We're just going to leave that open to the conservation land. So what we're proposing to do is at the corner of that land, 100 feet back to the next corner and then down to where our emergency gate is for the fire department at the corner of Bow and Lang Street, and then replace that fire department gate that is there now that is pretty much unusable and fallen down, along with another section to the left of it. There's a more kind of a detailed drawing on the reliable fence proposal that I presented as well, that has kind of the measurements and where we want to place the fencing. So if you've been out back, you see the large lumber rack that's kind of the main lumber rack for the yard. This would be all the way in the rear of the property behind the warehouse and in the back right-hand corner where we have some parking area now. And the proposal would be to use 6-foot high black vinyl coated chain link to blend in so that we didn't have anything that would be too unsightly. What was there previously were pressure treated posts with a green vinyl chain link that was more or less attached to the wooden posts. This would be a much more professional installation that Reliable Fence is proposing for us. And then it would also, like I say, have a usable fire department emergency access gate in that rear corner where the intersection of Bow Street and Lang Street is.
That would be helpful.
Yes.
All right.
Hopefully they never have to use it, but.
All right. I think that's clear to me. Let me just see if commissioners have any questions. Luis, may I pick on you first?
I don't really have any questions. I think it's a straightforward problem to be solved.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Just a little clarification. This, in effect, where you're proposing to replace an existing fence, although constructed somewhat differently, correct?
That is correct, Paul. So what was there? What I was going to say is what was there were 6x6 pressure treated posts with green chain link, much of which has already fallen down, and we've gotten rid of that. There is an existing gate there that is not usable, that is attached to some other posts and fencing that would be replaced. And so this is going in the exact footprint of that existing fence where it is now and where it used to be.
Thank you.
That gate
No,
is
nothing
in pretty
further.
rough shape. All right. Thank you. Nia.
I have no issues whatsoever with the application.
All right. Melinda.
I'm fine with the application.
Thank you, Dennis.
I don't have a problem with the application, but I did have a quick question. Is this the area where it's rather a mess in back and there's a car with a flat tire that's been there for quite a long time, or is this on the other side?
No, it is in that area where there's a Cape style house on the corner there, and there's the gentleman that is there has several cars there, but that gate abuts that property.
So, but that isn't your right of way going through there.
That is the right of way that goes in there, and he does park vehicles there occasionally.
For a couple of weeks at a time with a flat tire?
Yeah, I guess I could say something about it, but I'm not exactly sure whether or not I have jurisdiction over that, because that's not really my land there. It is the town's land, as it's part of the bike trail.
Okay. I just thought as part of this new fence, which I think is a wonderful idea, you might clean up that area, that's all.
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to talk to him about it. I just don't know if I have jurisdiction over that, where that's on the, he's actually parking on the bike trail.
Well, you may, it's
That's even worse.
You may actually, it would be a good chance to reach out to the fire department and point out that here.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking.
All right, Catherine, any observations, thoughts?
I have no objection to the proposal as outlined.
All right, thank you, Kate. Up here.
No objections. Looks good.
Okay, and Abigail, any thoughts?
No objection.
All right, so I think we've said what we need to say. I'm going to open this up to public comment. Is there any comment on the application for fencing at 126 Lowell Road? And I'm going to look around the Zoom room. I see a lot of just silence. And I think I'd look for a motion from the commission.
I move that we approve the application of Concord Lumber Corporation to remove and replace existing green chain link fencing gates and pressure treated wooden posts with a 6 feet tall black vinyl coated chain link fence and gate with black posts.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
If I can.
Yes, you can. All right, we have a motion that's been seconded.
No, we can't.
Oh, you
I
can't
didn't
because
think
you're
I
not a
could.
voting member.
I'm not a voting member, no.
All right, which of you voting members would like to second it?
I'll second
Melinda.
it.
Melinda, thank you. It's nice to know Dennis seconded it, though. That's very sweet. All right, all in favor. Luis.
Aye.
Paul. That was an aye, I think. You dropped out there for a sec. Nia.
Yes,
Aye.
aye.
Melinda.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well, but let's go around and get everybody in here. Dennis.
Aye.
Catherine.
Aye.
Catherine. Kate.
Aye.
I'm going to mix everybody's name up. And Abigail.
Aye.
All right. Thank you all. So you're good to go. Thank you for a presentation to us and good luck. And if you want to talk to the fire department, they're very friendly.
Yeah, that's my next course of action. I appreciate the Historic District Commission's time and thank you for your support.
You're very welcome. Good luck.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. All right, folks. So on to our final new public hearing for the evening. This is the Concord Free Public Library, 129 Main Street. And this is, we're now seeing the application to amend the existing certificate of appropriateness. And this is focusing on parking, landscaping, hardscaping, and lighting changes. So I can just quickly introduce this by saying there have been a number of public meetings. There's been a great opportunity for public comment on a number of schemes, which I think we'll run through briefly tonight. You can see there are a number of people here to watch us as we deliberate. And I'm hoping everyone on this commission reviewed the material on the website. This should be a relatively straightforward discussion, but why don't we go ahead and hear from Mr. Adams and Mr. Bellefue. I think, are you all prepared to make a little presentation tonight?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. We'll make a brief presentation reviewing the materials that were submitted.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. At the August 6th HDC meeting, we agreed to withdraw consideration for on-site parking and indicated that we would give that plan more consideration and return to the HDC this fall. In late August and early September, we held 2 public Zoom meetings, as Peter mentioned, and reviewed and solicited feedback ultimately on 8 accessible parking plans. The library board voted to submit the plan that we will review tonight, but for context, I will quickly show you the other plans. Then our architect, Michael, will present the plan that we ask you to consider. So the other plans that we looked at, this is option 1. Option 1 is the plan that was previously approved by the HDC and the ZBA. You can go to the next plan, Michael or Heather. Option 2 is a slight modification of the approved plan. This also shows 2 on-street parking sites, parking plan, but there were some comments that in option 1, and if you could cycle back quickly to option 1, where the handicap symbols are, the wheelchair symbols are, is to note where the vehicle would park. And there was some comment in discussion that those spaces, which are in line with the other cars that would be parked on Main Street, are close to the edge of the street, just the way they are close to for all of the other people parking on the street. If you look at option 2, there's a hashed section outside the vehicle. That's actually 8 feet wide and provides a buffer zone for opening the door for anybody who's in a vehicle that's parking in the accessible spaces. So it pushes it a little bit more onto the library property, but this would be similar to the approved plan with 2 on-street parking spaces, but that we think is a little safer. Next option. Option 3 is, option 4. I think we want option 3.
Jeff, option 3 is the one we were presenting tonight, so I pushed that to the end. You want to just...
Okay, I thought it was the other way around, but option 4 shows 3 on-site spaces similar to what we had presented a year and a half ago, the initial plan. And this is a plan that gets 3 parking spaces on site and are considered to be some to be safer than on-street parking. Option 5. This is a similar plan as option 4, but with only 2 parking spaces on site. And again, this is on library property. You can see Main Street below. So you would pull off the street into these 2 spaces. Option 6. There are actually 2 versions of option 6, and these were submitted by Sandy Smith, and they're very similar to the last 2 options we looked at, but have the spaces on the opposite side of this area outside the yellowwood tree, and again, on library property. This option 6.2 shows 2 spaces, and the next option shows 3. And then finally, option 7. This was a plan suggested by Ned Perry for a circular drop-off area. There are 2 parking spaces. This is similar to a design that Ned saw at CA, and we looked at this as a viable and interesting plan. Unfortunately, this particular plan has some other challenges associated with it, including the necessary removal of a heritage tree, the yellowwood tree that's currently protected on that side of the property. So Michael, I'll turn it over to you for the presentation of the plan that was approved by the library board.
Sure. Thanks again for having us. Michael Belfay from Johnson Roberts again. So this is option 3, which is what, as Jeff mentioned, we're presenting tonight. I'll quickly run through, and this was in the application, but some of the pros and cons that we had for this specific scheme, and starting with the cons, and I'll get to the pros, which are why the library board chose to submit this plan. So this is a modification of the plan that we submitted in June, and I'll get to the changes in a bit. But first of all, I'll just go over quickly the cons. One, as I'm sure you're all aware, one of the cons here was that the version that we submitted in June, which this is a modification, was negatively received by the HDC. So I'm hoping that the changes that we've made tonight that we'll present address those concerns, but that was certainly one of the cons with this one. This, as with all of the off-street, on-site parking options, has more limited landscape area than the on-street parking spaces. And then these next 2 cons really go for all of the off-street parking options. But off-street, obviously, one of the difficulties is we've got a relatively high pedestrian traffic area here as people will be moving, mostly on the walkway, we hope, but into the new entrance here off Main Street. But in that same vicinity, an off-street parking like this requires a backing up maneuver in this relatively high pedestrian traffic area. And another difficulty is with this scheme is that if someone were to pull in to this parking area and the 3 spaces were taken, the difficulty maneuvering to get out of there. Now, I think what they would probably do is pull into one of these van access aisles is the same width as a parking spot. So hopefully it wouldn't be too complicated. You could pull in and back up, but that's certainly one downside with this option as well. So the pros and the reasons why the Library Corporation Board of Trustees chose this option were This gives us 3 accessible parking spaces, which are the number of spaces that the library was originally looking for back in March of 2019. It reuses the existing curb cuts of there are 2 driveways here. There's a gravel driveway for the house at 151 Main Street and another gravel driveway for the library. So this allows us to reuse that existing curb cut without losing on-street parking, without having to, there's a utility pole over here, so that allows us to avoid those. This also minimizes the impact. We stay out of the drip line of this heritage yellowwood tree, so we don't need to do any regrading or any other work under this tree. So that's a big one here. This also gets us of any of the options that we looked at for on-site or off-street parking that allow us to avoid relocating that utility pole. This one gets a space closest to the door. And this is also the only option, off-street option, where we had the opportunity to do some landscape buffering between both the street and the parking area, and then between the parking area and the building. So, and one of the other big advantages of any off-street option is the opportunity that these 3 spaces are dedicated to library use, which on-street parking obviously doesn't afford it. It's open to anyone in the public, whether or not they're using the library. So the Library Corporation felt that this was provide the best balance between the needs of the library patrons, the aesthetic considerations, as well as long-term maintenance. And I'd like to quickly just look at the, this is the landscape plan that we submitted subsequent to our initial application, September 21st, I believe it was. We, last week on the 7th, I believe, submitted some updated drawings that included some additional screening that our landscape architect Kim Ahern will get into in a minute. But I wanted to just quickly look at the renderings that we have here. So this, like I said, gives us the opportunity for some screening here between the street and the parking, as well as if we swing out here. We're hoping that this addresses some of the concern that members of the HDC had when we presented a similar scheme over the summer, which at the time had a bike rack. In this area, we've moved the bike rack to be off the walkway, which gives us the opportunity to introduce some more screening between the parking area and the building. And I'll turn it over to Kim Ahern now to discuss the landscape a bit.
Just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Hi, Kim.
Hi. Well, I think Michael did a very good job. But I guess just to be a little more specific, we are putting several layers of plant material in front of the new connector piece. And I don't know, I don't know how to point to it, but I have a redbud tree that will take some shade because it's a little bit shady back in there. I've got layers of evergreen. Oh, that's good. And just drop down a little bit. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And some inkberries. So there's some evergreens. And then against the building itself, those are called Cephalotaxis. Those are an upright evergreen. They look a little bit like a yew, but they're a more upright plant. They take full shade. So there is, and some ground cover as well. We still are maintaining the rhododendrons along the edge of the building. So really the plant material around the yellowwood doesn't really change that much. It's what was originally proposed. We did change the location of the bike rack. We brought it down towards the street. So we thought that was a better spot and allowed the little bit better access right into the building and gave us more room for landscape.
All right, thank you, Kim. And also with us this evening are our project engineers from GGD, and we are all available to answer your questions. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. Thank you, team. So I wanted to follow up on just a couple of things. I know there was a lot of input from the accessibility community in town during the public hearings. And what I would say in general to the commission, I know a couple of us, Melinda was at one of the meetings. I think we hear loud and clear, it makes a lot more sense for an accessibility, from an accessibility point of view, to have parking spaces closer to the building, especially given the winter conditions in this area, but also just maneuverability wise, it's further to travel. So we understand that. I think the other question I had was about the traffic study. Now, Michael, maybe you could remind us, or Jeff, there was a lot of discussion about, let's call it the relative safety of these schemes from a pedestrian vehicular, I don't know what the right word is, congestion perspective. Is there any particular thoughts that make this scheme the one that makes the most sense around those issues?
Michael, do you want to respond, or let Nathan and Chris?
I'll quickly respond, and then maybe Nathan or Chris, if you want to follow up. I'm not a traffic engineer, so with that caveat, I'll say what our traffic engineer, which is Van Ness and Associates, and they're not here tonight, but what they were looking for is to minimize conflicts. So, conflict between cars, conflicts between cars and pedestrians. I don't think that there was necessarily a standout, any scheme that was, hands down better. They all had benefits and drawbacks. I believe the feeling of Van Ness was that the on-street actually provided the least amount of opportunities for conflict. There's no pedestrian crossing, there's no cars entering, or left-hand turns or backing up maneuvers. But of the on-site options, I don't think that there was one that was necessarily preferred. But Chris or Nathan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I would concur that it was discussed in the meetings that all of these options are inherently safe, but that each has minor drawbacks or pros to it, just as Michael had just said.
Okay, thank you.
And Jeffrey Dirk did weigh in, as Michael said, that the on-street strategy had fewer conflicts.
Okay. Well, it had fewer conflicts of I see of the pedestrian vehicular type, but there are other issues.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume with all the schemes have liabilities and benefits. I get the sense. Okay. Let me just see. There was one other thing I was just thinking.
Peter?
Yes.
Could I just say something?
Please.
Having been on the Zoom call
yes.
with the traffic expert, it was definitely my take on that he thought that the safest option was essentially option 1 or 2, what we had originally approved. And he made that point, I thought, quite clearly. And I don't know, I can't remember right now, is there a sidewalk right now along the whole front on, are basically people who might be walking along there going to have to watch out for the cars coming in and out?
There is
Yeah.
a sidewalk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that might have been one of his issues as well. There's not a huge difference between the first parking lot and the front of the building. I expected a little more of a compromise than what I'm seeing here with from our initial, what we approved to what you're recommending here. This looks very, very similar to me to what we did not like initially.
Okay, hang on a sec. I'm just going to make sure there isn't any. Is there any open questions? Well, Melinda, I was going to go around and see what commissioners' responses were. So I guess we're starting with you, Melinda. So, so what do you think? No, do you have any other observations about this particular scheme? Maybe elaborate a little bit on what you thought the compromise would look like. What were you thinking?
You're addressing this to me again?
Yes.
Well, I think what I was thinking is that what we were shown at that meeting, the two Zoom meetings, I only sat in on one, there was, the 7 solutions, and those were what the additional options were. But they weren't that much different from where you're going to have the van parked and all of this asphalt between the street and the library. And it's that's, in my opinion, ruining the look of this beautiful building. And when the traffic guy comes and says, look, the safest, best place is to do exactly what you had originally, which was to put the handicap parking spots right on the street. And I love the idea of option 2, where you actually have an 8, I've forgotten how many feet did they say? 8 feet?
8 feet, yeah.
Yes.
Which gives them certainly more of a safety barrier. I don't think it's, in my opinion, I don't think the difference between where you would get out and where you're going to go into the library is worth ruining the entire look of this expensive and lovely and long-lasting building.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go around the horn on my screen. Nia, you are next.
Right. Well, the public forums on accessibility were very informative. I attended both sessions, and I think we can all agree that accessible parking for the library is important. When considering this proposed parking amendment, though, I think the commission can't look at it in a vacuum, but must evaluate it in the context of the entire campus, including the new building. The green space around the library is a very important asset for the town center. And the approved landscape plan outside the Link building entrance creates a welcoming environment for everyone. And if COVID has taught us anything, it's that we need outdoor gathering spaces. What better place than outside the new entrance to the Link building? The new building has a very large footprint, and that makes green space even more critical. So all in all, I am not in favor of the proposed parking amendment for several reasons. As been pointed out, the off-street parking is not safe for those who enter, can't find a spot, and have to back out onto Main Street. There will also be too much maneuvering of cars near a busy pedestrian entrance. The asphalt creates a large impervious area that looks like a runway to the Link building. And I believe that the proposed parking spaces are still within the drip line of the yellowwood tree and thus would damage the roots. Really, the Link part of the new building was one of the most problematic areas for the commission. So the softening of that facade was critical to the approval. And I think Kim Ahern's original plan was absolutely brilliant. Under the proposed landscape plan, the cherry tree that is specified at the curb, while it's a lovely tree, it will do nothing to screen either the building or the asphalt, as it is a very airy tree with tiny leaves and delicate branching. The small bed outside the Link building looks to be about 8 feet deep, or wide, excuse me, and holds 1 2 to 2.5 inch caliper redbud tree. Another lovely choice, but unlikely to do much in the way of screening. And the row of upright evergreens immediately in front of the Link building will likely be maintained at the height of the base of the windows and thus not screen much of anything. Finally, the approved design of the building and parking took months to achieve and required compromise on all sides. I still think that the approved street parking is the most appropriate, with the addition of an 8-foot buffer presented in option 2, if that is considered to be even better than what we approved. Although these spaces may not be dedicated library spots, I believe that given their location, they will likely be used almost exclusively by library patrons. And that's my piece.
All right, thank you, Nia. Paul, would you mind going next?
I think I really agree with my distinguished colleagues, and I think Nia's articulate observations about this plan versus option 2 are meaningful. So in broad brush, I think this runway, or I mean, not to be pejorative about it, I think people have worked very hard to come up with a design here that is reasonable and in the view of some people, ideal. I happen to agree with Nia and Melinda that option 2 is preferable for all of the reasons that Nia articulated. The more open space we can save, the more beautiful the area, the more welcoming and the more useful it is for contemplative meetings or reading or COVID relief or whatever is in our futures. So while I'm very respectful of the work that's gone into this alternative, I would still approve and endorse option 2.
All right, thank you, sir. I'm just going to keep going around in the order I've got on my screen. Abigail is next.
Thank you. So, so in broad strokes, I agree with what my colleagues have said thus far. You know, I think one of the things that we always have to consider on the HDC is almost every application that we consider requires a balancing act, a balancing between the code requirements, the programmatic needs of the applicant, and our own mandate. And we see this with, you know, public properties, we see this with private properties, and our responsibility really is to look at the whole picture and to choose, if presented with options, which we are in this instance, the option that meets the code requirements and programmatic needs and public interest, but also preserves the integrity of the property from a historical perspective and what is our mandate, which is really to preserve the integrity of the districts. I agree that option 2 is far and away the best option when it comes to the HDC mandate. I know that there initially had been some concerns about on-street versus off-street parking. We worked really hard to move parking off-site and on-street, but in a way that maintained the safety requirements and the programmatic needs. You know, from everything that I understand, you know, the traffic engineers and the safety experts have said that, you know, the on-site parking minimizes conflicts. It, you know, provides
on-street parking.
On-street parking, sorry. On-street parking minimizes conflicts. The 8-foot buffer addresses the community concerns about opening doors into traffic, et cetera. I agree with Nia that the idea of dedicated parking, I think, is a bit of a moot point. The only other public access space in that stretch of Main Street is Concord Academy. They have a plethora of closer handicapped options, parking on-site, on campus for any needs there. So really the only people that would be using these spaces would be library patrons. It eliminates huge pedestrian conflicts, and all things being equal from a safety perspective. So if on-street parking is as safe or safer than the on-site parking, then we would defer to our mandate, which is that we want to preserve open spaces, we want to preserve historical integrity, we want to preserve kind of the view from Main Street, all of that. So if we have a safer option that is less impactful on the site, to me, that's a no-brainer. That in this way, the option 2 with the 8-foot buffer accomplishes everything that we've been looking to do in this process, which is to create accessible parking spaces that are safe and effective, and maintain a visual integrity of the landscape space outside of the library. So I'm really pleased to see this option. I think it's a really effective option. I think it's a creative solution. I appreciate the time that the library and the community have taken together to suss this all out. I know it hasn't been easy, but I'm really pleased. This process has worked the way it's intended to work. We've been able to maintain the integrity of a building. We've been able to maintain green space and the view from Main Street while updating the accessibility to a building that's an important part of the, the historic and cultural and literary tradition of Concord. So I'm really pleased with option 2, and will say flatly that the on-site parking just simply isn't a viable option in my mind. So that's my opinion.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to keep going around. Luis, you're next on my screen.
I just wanted to echo basically all the comments of my distinguished colleagues and expand a little bit of what Abigail said, which is that everything is a compromise. And I think that the applicant has to take into account that this has been a substantial compromise in terms of the community, because in the process of approving this project, the effects that have been exerted into a very historic structure, which is the Haywood Benjamin House, are deemed by many members of the community and the Massachusetts Historical Commission as being entirely inappropriate. And the response of the applicant has been to disengage themselves from that process. So I think that the applicant—
We're not talking about that tonight.
No, I think that the applicant has to take into account that there's a compromise that has been going on for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that the arguments that the applicant has made make a persuasive set of arguments in favor of the proposal. And I will add that while the applicant states that there's the avoidance of conflict, I believe that conflict is increased when you have an area of automobiles maneuvering around and going back and forth with pedestrians. And I also disagree entirely with the large amount of asphalt that this will create. And finally, I believe that it's quite appalling that the applicant comes with 7 propositions, of which I think 3 of them are made by well-meaning members of the community. You see, as architects, they are forced, and it's the ontological obligation to consider solutions that are within the scope of their expertise. And I don't believe that this has been the case. I think that this has been a pragmatic solution that addresses the desires of all people without any sort of compromise. And I specifically surprised that nobody has ever considered putting a parking space in the Sudbury in the Sudbury Street side of the library, because that would solve many of the problems, and it would be a creative solution and would allow for what is already a controversial building to be an asset in as much as it can be. So I don't agree that the proposal being made is appropriate. And I echo the feelings of my previous commissioners. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Catherine.
In essence, I would agree with all the excellent points that have been made by my fellow commissioners. I too, from the beginning, had an issue with the great expanse of asphalt. Basically, that did feel visually like a runway to the bridging structure, which I think is a gracious and harmonious building, but especially when there is nice landscaping that's buffering its visual aspect instead of having this large expanse of tarmac. So I reference back to what Abby was saying in terms of if option 2 with the on-street parking does achieve all the many layers of shared goals for both the accessible parking and the building and the safety, then I'm much more in favor of that option.
All right, thank you, Catherine. And Kate, I think I don't overlook Kate, but you're muted.
Okay.
There you are.
Yes. Option 2, there's nothing I can add that improves upon what my fellow commissioners have said. I appreciate Melinda's pointing out what the traffic commissioner, his
Engineer, maybe?
Engineer, thank you, engineer. And Nia discussing the various points of the landscaping and so on. It's taken a lot of work from the library. I appreciate it, but a lot of work from the commission, but I'm also an option 2 person.
All right, thank you. I do want to point out to everybody, we're not discussing option 2 tonight. Technically, the application is for this option before us, which is really number 3. So I just want to add that I actually, frankly, if we're going to do an on-site option, option 5 is the one that seemed to strike me as the best compromise because it actually allows a much larger landscape area in front of the building that could be looked at. I don't get the sense that, well, because we've been discussing option 2 for the last 20 minutes, I don't get the sense that the commission, if we had to vote tonight on this option before us, we'd probably say no, or it wouldn't pass. However, it sounds like there's interest in seeing option 2 developed, which is not what's being presented. And so I'm actually going to ask the applicant if you would be willing to revise your designs, winnow them down to develop option 2. And frankly, I, of course, was in favor of option 5. I don't know if that's worth looking a little more closely. Because we really have put a lot of care into this decision, and I really do respect the commissioner's recollections of how hard we all work together as a community to come up with the solution in option 1. Is that something you would be willing to do?
Yeah, hi, Peter. Jeff Adams here again. Well, thank you to everybody for all of those comments. We articulated the reasons we thought the design presented might be the best for the community, but listening to the comments, we understand the concerns and consistent lack of support for that on-site parking plan. And I've communicated with some of the other trustees during this meeting who are also listening, and we also understand the value of option 2, which, as Nia or Melinda suggested, I think Melinda, that is a bit of a compromise on the approved plan. Now, just to talk a little bit about option 2 for a moment, it has the exact landscaping plan that has been approved by the HDC. The only change is in the public way, and it actually it adds a little bit of paving for the parking spaces. I'm not certain about this. Heather may be able to address it, but I'm not sure the HDC purview extends into the public way. But regardless of that issue, I believe there is support from the library board to pursue approval of option 2.
So sorry to interject. So Jeff, so what you're suggesting is that we've already approved everything about option 2 that exists on the library property. The only changes would be in the street.
Correct.
So that's a question of Heather. We've already approved this in terms of the library property. So Heather, is any change made to the streetscape? Because I would assume they would need town approval for that. Is that our jurisdiction or not? Because if it's not, then I would consider that to be kind of a moot point. If that's not our jurisdiction, that's not our thing.
From the approved plan?
Pardon?
Does the sidewalk change at all from the approved plan?
It does.
Yeah, because I thought you said it was bumped in a little bit more than.
Yeah, that's a good point. The parking area is all on the street, but if you look carefully at this line, you can see the property line, and the sidewalk would be pushed slightly onto library property. So technically, the sidewalk relocation would be under the purview of the HDC. That's a correct interpretation.
Yeah, so I think the commission would need to approve this plan.
Thank you.
So we would need to see a change to the submission. You know, it's interesting listening to all the discussion. It really, since the COVID restrictions came into effect, the sort of ramping up of the need for outdoor gathering spaces has suddenly become a whole different issue for the town, which does favor these first couple of options. Okay, well, I've heard from commissioners. Are we ready to open it up for public comment? So I think what we're going to do is, because the application is actually for, I think, what's called option 3, I think we're going to ask for public comment on option 3. So you've heard the commissioners discuss various options and preferences, but now I think it's time for the public to be able to comment. So I'm going to open it up. Is there public comment on the application for 129 Main Street for this change to the parking and landscape plan?
Sorry, Peter, can I,
yes,
this is Michael Johnson Roberts. Can I just add one thing quickly? I just wanted to, sorry, I just wanted to address, I didn't mean to construe whether or not any of these plans is safer than another. I know that that was a comment from some of the commissioners. I just wanted to clarify, we're not saying, you know, we've looked at these, we believe they're all inherently safe and all, you know, meet standards for parking design, but I didn't want to suggest that one is more or less safe. We didn't do any, you know, comparison really beyond what Jeffrey Dirk from Van Ness offered as his thoughts in that previous public meeting.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I do think that the commissioners were making kind of personal statements, if you will, there about how the pedestrians will probably walk across the parking lot and what have you. But thank you. So I'm going to open it up to public comment now. I don't know, Heather, can you see raised hands? And do people know how to use the?
Oh, Meryl Schwartz has her hand raised.
Yeah. All right. So do people, by the way, know how to use the raise hand function? If you don't, then maybe, can people turn their video on? Can we do that now?
Yes, they should be able to.
It should be on.
But Meryl, go ahead. You were first. So Meryl Schwartz, please go ahead.
Hi. I'm a member of the Commission on Disability who has met with the library committee many times, and I just want to express my dismay at the lack of consideration of what we have expressed over and over again as a commission, and I'm not speaking for the commission, but I believe there are several commission members here. This is the mandate is to make the library accessible to all the citizens of Concord. And we have reiterated in every meeting that we felt very strongly that on-street parking is not a safe or possible alternative for anybody who has a disability. It makes the entrance unsafe, not welcoming, and quite honestly, a hazardous situation. It is not a welcoming place to go and won't be available to the whole community. So I am distressed to hear that every one of the members of the Historic District Commission didn't seem to really take the needs of the whole community into play, in spite of our renewed efforts to make it very clear that on-street parking is not a viable opportunity for us, for the whole community. Making Concord citizens accessible means that on-site parking needs to be part of your plan. And all your discussions about the beautiful landscaping and not having this not having the library go outside of its purview of a historic building really don't cut it for the needs of Concord. So thank you very much, but I'm very distressed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Meryl. I see, is Jean Goldsberry, is that our next hand up there, Heather?
Yes.
Yes, hi, Jean.
Thank you. So the Commission on Disabilities has met with the Library Corporation several times. We've come to the HDC meetings to express our concern, and Meryl is absolutely correct. On-street parking does not serve people with mobility issues who may be able to drive, but then have to get out of the car near the driving part of the street and risk themselves getting hit by a car in order to go to the library. Many of our members have said, I never go to the main library anymore. I go to the Fowler Library where there is off-street parking and it's safe. And it would be a huge disservice to this community to spend millions of dollars on a beautiful new, otherwise fully accessible building and remodeling project and have it be something that members who have, or citizens who have mobility disabilities are not able or willing to use because they feel that they're risking their health and their life by getting out near the cars that are driving past. They're people who can't move quickly out of the way of an oncoming car. And this is a major safety issue for people with disabilities. And we do approve of the version that's been presented tonight with 3 on-site parking spaces. We would be fine with 2 on-site parking spaces, but we feel very strongly that the parking needs to be on-site
off the street where people can safely egress from their vehicle and go into the library and enjoy all that it has to offer.
All right, thank you, Jean. Well said. Are there other comments? I don't see any hands raised. Well, Ned's raising his actual hand, which is technically allowable. So Ned, why don't you go next? Ned Perry, I see you've raised your hand.
Well, technical or not, Peter, Melinda, Nia know fully well that the approved plan that Melinda and Nia would like to fall back on was approved based upon false and incorrect information presented to the commission. Second, the commission approved a 15 vehicle parking space by the Concord Museum in the Lexington Road Historic District without any problem at all. Third, the driveway next to the Haywood Benjamin house has been there for 200 years. Pedestrians go up and down Main Street all the time looking for cars coming in and out of the Haywood Benjamin house driveway. There's also a driveway for the library vehicle right next to the Haywood Benjamin house driveway. The proposal that you have before you tonight is no different than what's been there for 200 years. And for you all to claim that you want to have lawn and trees in front of what you have approved as a total change of the Haywood Benjamin house historically. I mean, you guys and ladies just have to look at yourself in the mirror and just decide what you're about and what this community needs as for accessibility to the library. The Commission on Disability has stated month after month after month their preference for off-street parking. Please do this as a community effort. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ned. Are there other public comments? Mary Beth Barker, I see, has her hand raised. Mary Beth, are you there? You have to unmute yourself.
I believe I'm unmuted. Can
there
you hear me?
There
okay. I can understand why some people might think that the option 2 with the sort of recessed on-street parking and the 8-foot buffer is okay. But in reality, most of the, myself, I'm a wheelchair user and I have a wheelchair car that opens from the rear with a ramp that comes down. And most of the other people I know with mobility problems who are exiting their vehicle often need to exit it from the back. And when you have the sort of cars in a line like that, it's just not a matter of the having 8 feet to one side that gives you clearance to get out safely. You also need a lot of clearance from behind. So the on-site option gives you clearance in both directions. It gives you clearance side to side, whether you're a passenger getting out, the driver getting out, or whether you're a person who you can get out of the vehicle and then take your mobility device out of the back of the vehicle. It gives you clearance in all directions. And I think it just serves a greater number of people with disabilities who have mobility problems and use a variety of different devices. So for that reason, I really do support the on-site option. I do understand some of the safety issues that people have raised. I know that that's sort of you know, that's kind of a compromise. And I don't know if things can be done to sort of address that issue to make it a little safer. But, you know, that does seem to be an issue that I recognize. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Other comments?
Janet Byer keeps raising her hand in person.
Janet. Okay, Janet.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't see everybody.
I've heard an awful lot of talk tonight about shrubbery and trees, and not an awful lot about people with disabilities. And the issue here is how to best accommodate people with disabilities. There are enough trees in town. There are enough trees and bushes on it. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful building. Adding even 2 of those spaces isn't going to take away from the beauty of the building. And as somebody who uses a walker, it's difficult for me to get out onto the street. It would be so much easier. And this appears also to be, this option appears to be much closer to the door, which is, I think, something else to be considered. I think all of us think that we're never going to have to use a cane or a wheelchair or a walker, but don't count on it. And you'll want to go to the library too. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. The way I would put it is if you live long enough, you're going to be using a cane.
You're going to be using it, yeah.
All right, other public comment. I'm looking at the hands raised on the boxes. Anybody waving at us? I would appreciate it if people could tell me if they want to speak. I can't quite see everybody. Luis, hang on a sec. Let's see if there are any other public comment. I don't see any other public comments, so let's bring it back into the commission. Luis.
I want to address Mrs. Schwartz and Mrs. Goldberg's comments, which imply that this commission has no concern for the needs of people who have disabilities, and that we are rather concentrating on beauty and shrubs and trees and so forth. And I want to let you know that at least some of us have been forced to use a wheelchair and to be disabled for a while. So on first-hand experience, we know very well what it is not to have access to buildings or to have limited access to buildings and so forth. The issue here is not an issue of accessibility, because we are all in favor of having accessibility to all the citizens of Concord, whether they can walk in their feet or whether they can have to use crutches or whether they have to go on a wheelchair. The issue here is how to best accomplish that purpose. And the conflict that we have as a commission is that the proposals that have been presented are lopsided. They don't take into account other alternative solutions that accomplish exactly the same goals of providing accessibility to people who are disabled. The discussions that have been made on this particular issue have always been about the same spot, the same site, and what to do there. And there has never been any suggestion that we could consider other spaces, you see. And, you know, in a very cursory exam of the issue, I would propose that the space that exists in front of the entrance of the library in the Sudbury Street side is perfectly appropriate for library parking, and that would be extremely appropriate, and it would fulfill all the needs that people with disabilities have. So it's not an issue, and I beg that you consider this position of the HTC not being sympathetic to the needs of people with disabilities. It's an issue of what is the best solution. And from my perspective and the perspective of my fellow commissioners, I don't believe that the applicant has entertained all the possibilities to accomplish the best possible solution. In fact, the solution that is being proposed has many, many limitations, and alternative solutions are much better, but they need to be considered seriously, and instead of going back to the same idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Other commissioners, hang on a sec, Jeff, let me just make sure. Paul, let me hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, I just want to say that speaking only for myself, have probably not been as sensitive as I should have been or would like to have been to the concerns of Mrs. Schwartz and others who've spoken for the disability community. But of course, we are all engaged in the art of compromise here. I don't think anybody wants to put a disabled person at risk in the streetscape. And there are many circumstances in town and in every town in which parking for disabled citizens isn't perfect, but it's manageable. And I don't hear you saying that it's not manageable here. You're appropriately raising the issue whether it's the safest possible alternative. And arguably, it may not be a perfect alternative, but it is an alternative. And I think in the judgment of the commission, in most circumstances, it's a reasonable alternative. There may be circumstances in which a particular individual can't disembark on the street. And I'm not sure we've made provision for that in some temporary way on a given day for a van to pull in somewhere so that a citizen of Concord can safely disembark and go to the library. So I don't have a perfect answer to this, and I'm not sure I have all the alternatives in mind at this point, but I do confess to probably having been less sensitive to what I think is a critical need than perhaps I should have been, and I'm still willing to look at alternatives here.
Thank you. One thing I would offer as well. Somebody's echoing on me. If people could mute there, let's see, did that work? Thank you. So I, as the chair, think that the option we're looking at tonight is not what we think is a good idea, but I really do think there is an on-site parking option that is workable. My personal sense is that it's something like option 5, which reduces the number of on-site spaces to 2 and creates a much larger opportunity for landscape or even gathering space, but brings parking onto the site and closer to the building. And I frankly would like to see that developed. I'm also sensitive. I just want to ask the applicant, Luis raises the point about Sudbury Road. I thought we covered that during the bigger discussion. Did we not talk about that? Jeff, you're muted there.
Yes, we did, Peter, during the main application. And commissioners may recall that the town planner got involved and looked at the size of that in previous applications and indicated that it was a non-starter because there was insufficient space to achieve the goals on that side. And then the town manager weighed in and indicated that that wasn't a feasible alternative for us to consider. So that was discussed some time ago. We know also that there are currently 2 handicap accessible parking spaces in the adjacent town lot, and we're lobbying for a 3rd when that lot gets rebuilt. However, that's quite a hike and you have to cross Sudbury Road, so not ideal. I also just wanted to offer one response to Mary Beth Barker's comment, which was a good one about rear access from a van. But these two spaces that have been approved by the HDC are actually extra long because Gene Goldsberry alerted us to that van need back in the original design. So these two, the approved on-street spaces, have extra space in the back for rear access. So I guess we're a little unsure what to do next. There's clearly not support for the 3 on-site parking, the consistent lack of support from the commissioners this evening. Peter, you commented that the 2 on-site is an attractive alternative, but I wonder how different that is from the full commissioner's view to the 3 on-site spaces that haven't received any support tonight. However, the on-street option 2 with an additional buffer zone achieved consistent support from all commissioners. And the library board would support that alternative that has the existing landscaping design that has been approved by the HDC.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I think that, so just to recap a couple different things. Number one, let's all try to remember this driveway has been here, as Ned points out, for a while. Whether it's macadam or not, it's been a driveway there for a long time. So even though we're killing this thing death by 1,000 curb cuts, that curb cut has been there for a long time. So this isn't like a new thing, that it's a new driveway, it's a runway. That argument doesn't hold water with me. So another thing is that all of these schemes do provide accessible parking of varying degrees with varying degrees of success. I personally have a slight disability. I would prefer to be closer to the building myself. I would prefer not to get out near the street, but if it were the only thing available, I would take it. I've done it before. So I still think, I hate to say it, I still think there's some work to be done here to try to develop an on-site scheme that continues to strike this balance between leaving the driveway as it's always been, providing some parking, but also providing more generous landscape. The landscape plan that was approved by us actually changes the whole site from its original intent. It removes the driveway entirely. So it's not like, again, I just want to remind everybody, this driveway has been here for a long time, which is persuading me to ask the applicant to go back and try one more time for an on-site solution. Because my personal feeling is I don't get the sense that option 2, it goes a little bit further than option 1, but it's sort of the spirit of the thing really wants to be on site. So I realize if we kick this down the road, it's going to be after the election, and maybe we'll all be too upset to talk about this in November. I don't know.
Peter, could I just respond to your
Yes.
comments, which were really helpful? Thank you for articulating that. If you look carefully at the designs that have been presented, and there's been a certain amount of discussion about distance from the accessible parking spaces to the door, and that's a very credible issue. We actually evaluated from the center of the parking areas for all 7 designs, and the difference between option 2, which has received some support, the distance is 85 feet to the door. So the on-street parking that's amended, pushed a little closer to the building with an 8-foot buffer on the street, is 85 feet to the door.
Mm-hmm.
Option 5, which you just suggested, is a good, credible alternative for 2 sites, 2 parking spaces, is 5 feet more. It's actually 90 feet away. So that particular design to the center is further from the door, just slightly by 5 feet. But the nuances in distance between the different designs are not huge.
Okay. All right. I saw some raised hands. Paul, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I hesitate to ask this, but is there a potential compromise which takes the option to spaces in the street and large spaces and adds one off street? In other words, I guess I'm addressing this in part to those who are more informed about the needs of the disabled community, but how often is it that, for example, at Fowler, that 2 handicap spaces are in fact used simultaneously? I mean, certainly it must happen, but what is, can you say anything about the probable need simultaneously for 2 spaces if, in addition to 1 space off-site, you had the enlarged parking spaces on the street? This is just prompted by my own ignorance of the situation.
Not sure if I'm supposed to respond, Paul, but I'll take a stab at what I think you might have been suggesting. I think there are a few different options. At one point, I spoke with the town about, because the library would really like to see 3 accessible parking spaces in addition to the Sudbury Road town parking lot. Initially, or at one point, I spoke with the town about the potential of a 3rd space on Main Street. And I think that may be viable. It would eliminate 1.5 existing parking spaces. The approved plan, most of you will recall, actually adds a parking space to downtown. Just the math is that there's 1 more space that's involved, and that's the plan you've approved. What you may have just suggested, Paul, is a design, at least that I was imagining, that might have a separation between 2 on-street parking spaces and an entrance into, for the ability of 1 on-site space, because we need to have access on-site and the street parking. And I think the only way that can be done is to split it and to have access between the 2. Is that what you were thinking?
I guess I'm imagining any alternative which, I mean, to some extent there has to be on-site access anyway, does there not, for deliveries or whatever, or are those all off-site? Okay.
That's all on Sudbury Road.
Okay, but then yes, why could we not have 2 extra length spaces on the street, a curb cut in between, and an on-site space that, you know, does minimal to compromise the kinds of aesthetic issues that we're all talking about, but recognizes that there are people for whom exiting on the street is probably a serious risk or a meaningful risk, let's put it that way.
We could look at that. I think even for 1 on-site parking space, it will require the U-turn, you know, the ability for a 3-point turn to enter and come out and so on. So there's a certain amount of asphalt, but it would be less than any of the other alternatives. So we would be willing to look at that.
I mean, it may be that the issue there is that that's just not enough to, maybe that's, I'm sure that those of you who are more informed would say it's not enough, that you need more than 1, but we're trying to come to an accommodation here among, I think, equally interested citizens in the welfare of each and every one of us. So I wonder if that's a possibility, really.
The balance between asphalt and landscaping and accessibility are all compromises we're trying to deal with. So that alternative for 1 space on site, effectively the reduction of impermeable paving of asphalt would be the size of one vehicle, because you, for all intents and purposes, you still need the 3-point turn. So if you have 2, you have a certain amount of asphalt. If you have 1, you still need the turning radius, and it's just one less vehicle space. That's the change in hardscape or asphalt.
All right. Meryl, I see you've got a question. Hang on a sec. Let me just see.
Yes.
Hang on a sec, Meryl. Let me just ask Nia to go first. I just wanted to get commissioners' input. Thank you. Nia.
I just wanted to follow up on something that I think Paul was asking, and I could have misinterpreted what he was saying. Whether we have any information over at Fowler, which is where I gather most of the people who need accessible parking are currently going. Do we have any statistics whatsoever on, at any given moment, how many people are using the handicap spaces there? I mean, I appreciate that various people said we need 3 spaces, we need 5 spaces, we need however many spaces, but do we have actually any data on what is currently being used at Fowler? You know, like how many people at the same time are showing up and looking for handicap parking?
We unfortunately don't have that.
Okay, thank you.
It is a little bit different, I would say, Nia, only because it's a smaller building. This has got more functions. It's closer to downtown. And I think the other thing is I personally know there has been an uptick in the number of placards that people have applied for. So there are people who have, there are more vehicles with accessibility permits these days. So the spaces, in my experience, tend to get filled up pretty quickly, no matter what. Meryl, hang on just a sec. Let me just see if other commissioners have thoughts. I'm just kind of looking around the horn here. Anybody who hasn't spoken? I haven't heard from Dennis. Catherine, do you have any observations?
Nothing to add right now.
Melinda. Oh, you're muted. You gotta unmute yourself. There you go.
I'm sorry. I feel like we're ignoring the fact that there still are going to be the 2 spaces across the street on the Sudbury side, with the additional 3rd one coming online. What we're proposing, and I'm sure this sounds terribly insensitive, but the streets on the spaces rather on Main Street are, I believe, half of the distance. We had the numbers from the Sudbury side to the library and up the ramp. I mean, it was almost half. That's a huge improvement. And then to get another 3rd space over in that parking lot is also an improvement. I often park over there, and an awful lot of the time, the handicap parking are both empty. I'm always tempted to use them. I don't, but I think that this design that we currently have is, it's not perfect, but it is a huge advantage over what we've had. And we have the luxury in this town of having a 2nd library where people prefer right now. They may not going forward, but not everybody needs to be that much closer. Even people in wheelchairs may be happy to go a little bit further. I feel like that they're trying very hard and have thought this through in the various designs that we've seen. And it's hard to come up with the perfect design, but I think they've made a good effort here.
All right, thank you. Abby, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so I think the difficult thing is that we would like to create a perfect campus for the library that has as much accessible parking as we could envision. But the reality is we're working within a constrained space. We're working within a footprint of historical buildings. And we have some accessible parking at a greater distance than is ideal on the Sudbury roadside. And we have the potential for closer accessible parking on the Main Street side. But we're faced with this dilemma of, is it on street? Is it off street? How do we make it work in a way that is both accessible to patrons with disabilities and also in keeping with, unfortunately, what is our very discrete mandate? We unfortunately don't have a magic wand to solve all of the town's ills. We are the Historic District Commission, and we are charged with maintaining the integrity of the district and what is appropriate in the district. And that we find that often comes in conflict with modern needs and modern considerations. And so our charge is pretty narrow, and we expand it in a way that we can to accomplish the goals of the town. And I realize I'm the youngest commissioner, and you may all think I'm not sensitive to this, but until last year when my mother-in-law passed, she accessed the main library via wheelchair for years. I access the main library with a stroller every day. I'm cognizant of this, but so I'm sensitive to the issues. I think that anything we can do to increase accessibility in a safe and reliable way that maintains the historical integrity of the building is a win. I'm not looking for the perfect, and I know a lot of people are. I'm looking for the best possible solution that we can work with what we have now. I would like to see an increase in accessible parking on the Sudbury roadside, which I know the library said they're working on in the public parking lot. And I would like to see an option for, what if we had a third spot? I mean, I can't imagine as a citizen of Concord balking at giving up a third regular quote unquote parking spot on the Main Street side. If we could have 3 accessible parking spots, and there's been so much done about street infrastructure, particularly in Boston, about how to delineate bike lanes, accessible parking, all of that from the regular flow of traffic. I think there's a creative solution that we can maintain that would give us 2 to 3 full-size, extended size, accessible parking spaces, differentiated enough from traffic on Main Street, but not technically on site, that we could come to a reasonable compromise. I don't know if there's been enough study into that, but I'm not willing to compromise enough to say, you know what, let's make it on-site parking, when I think there are solutions to be explored on Main Street. So I'm not giving up yet on any option, but I don't think that the on-site parking in the traditional sense that we've seen is the right solution.
All right, thank you, Abby. Merrill, did you have another comment? You have to unmute yourself though, please.
Yes. Number one, I'm one of the people who uses Fowler because of the parking. I have a walker and also use a scooter, which is why I feel very strongly that we need on-site parking. Number two, speaking about the Historic District Commission and the Commission on Disability, the Commission on Disability is under federal mandate, not, and it's really a civil rights issue about accessibility. Currently, the 2 spaces that you refer to for accessibility are not really within accessible standards from a federal point of view at all. So I think they need to be discounted. They are not accessible spaces for us, for people who cannot walk the distance. It's really such, you know, I tend to get emotional about this, but the reality and is that Fowler is the accessible library, and the main library is perceived to be inaccessible. And that is the perception that is pervasive in the community, and having more on-street parking will not help change that point of view among anybody who has a mobility issue. That's it. Thank you.
All right, I just want to point out we've been talking about this for an hour now. So I'm looking for new input, or I think we need to make some kind of a decision about what to do.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, Kate.
No, there's a Mr. Smith with his hand raised, which maybe you
Oh,
could.
sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Peter. I'm
Sandy
Sandy Smith.
Sandy. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't see you there.
I just like to make 2 points. One is that to remind the commission that the library expects the demand for parking to increase, because you'll remember the design calls for a very large forum that will seat 140 people. At the moment, there are only a very few events at the library, mostly a concert series that runs 3 times in the wintertime in the evening, that attracts that number of people to the library at one time. But with the forum being created out of the space that the current children's library will be vacating, there's an expectation that the programming will increase, and that demand for parking in general, and particularly for handicap parking, will also increase. So I think the commission should remember that when thinking about what the demand for accessible parking will be at the main library. Secondly, with respect to safety, I haven't heard any discussion this evening about winter conditions. And I know that that had come up in some of the community input sessions. And so perhaps some of the people on the Commission for Disability could speak to the additional difficulty of navigating on-street parking during winter conditions. And then finally, I guess I would say a third point is that the town of Concord has quite a number of curb cuts in the Main Street area. So in addition to the fact that the Haywood Benjamin House driveway has been there for quite a number of years, and people have negotiated the sidewalk up and down Main Street perfectly well with that. We also need to remember that there are quite a few driveways in the center of town where pedestrian traffic is even denser, and people seem to be able to manage that significantly, quite easily as well. So thank you very much, Peter.
You're welcome. All right. I'm going to try to wrap this up. My sense of this discussion is that there is still potentially some kind of on-site parking solution possible. We just haven't seen it yet. The solution we're being shown meets some people's, it satisfies some parties and not others. And again, we're looking at this, let's remember, in a vacuum. We're not talking about the Haywood Benjamin House or the library addition or anything. This is a new application. There's an approved scheme that frankly could be built tomorrow, which the library corporation's coming back and saying they'd like to amend. So I'd like to, as a measure of goodwill, have this discussion continue, because I think there is a solution that could bring parking onto the site that I just haven't seen yet. I mean, again, I keep going back to the 5th option, but and I may have to work on my fellow commissioners to convince them. But I personally would prefer to have parking on site. I think the issue that was just raised about winter conditions is a very good point. It is New England after all. Even with climate change, we're going to have snow and ice. So I still would like to see this developed further. That's just my sense of things. I don't want to reject it out of hand.
I'm sorry, Jean Goldsberry does have her hand raised. It
Go
has
ahead,
been
Jean.
raised for a while.
Just to clarify Merrill's point, the Sudbury Road parking spots today would not be acceptable under the ADA. And additional parking spots in the Sudbury Road lot cannot be considered accessible parking for the library. What's required under the ADA is for the additional space being added to the library is 2 accessible parking spots. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. That's a good clarification. And the reality is that having accessible parking on site is more welcoming in general to people. So not just people with disabilities, but I think the gesture is what more welcoming. And it's as important as having good outdoor landscape space. So I personally would really push for a different solution on the site with as little asphalt as possible, with 2 spaces instead of 3, and with I think you've got a very talented landscape architect who could work miracles there with the remaining landscape. And I think we've got time. This doesn't have to be done before this winter, correct, Jeff? I know I've seen the construction fences up.
No, that's true, Peter. And thank you for all these comments. As you know, we've spent a number of months and solicited feedback from our professionals, and the public has submitted a number of creative solutions as well. So I'm challenged because while you've suggested that there's some reasonable alternative, we have a limited space to achieve on-site parking, and I'm simply at a loss on your suggestion that there is another plan that's more accommodating or approvable by the commissioner. I haven't heard a single suggestion of an alternative that would meet approval, but you may be able to offer some feedback. And we will go back to the drawing board, but I'm frustrated that frankly there hasn't been a single good suggestion to address what you're suggesting we do right now. I think you're putting us in a very difficult situation, but we'll go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and perhaps we'll be able to come up with a different way to put parking on site in that very small area that will be more approvable by the commission.
Well, I understand, and I'm sorry I'm putting you in that spot.
Abby's
yes,
got something to say.
Go ahead, Abby.
Well, I mean, I think at the baseline, the majority of the commissioners, I mean, I think Jeff's in a difficult position because some commission members have supported on-site, but the majority of voting commission members have said that they don't support on-site parking. And so we've put the applicant in the position of there's a consensus among most commissioners that on-site parking, at least in the initial conversation, was not a viable option. And now we're telling them, yes, you have to do on-site parking or you have to provide another alternative. But
yeah,
if you're polling the commission members right now, I haven't heard a substantial support for on-site parking. So if we're going to ask the applicant to come back to us with something, we need to give them some direction. I'm happy to do that. My personal feeling has been that the street parking with modifications can be sufficient. I know that Nia represented that, Melinda represented that. I know that Luis represented that to some extent, Paul represented that. So I don't know what else we can tell the applicant to come back to us with when the commission seems to be moving in the direction of street parking versus on-site parking. So we need to give, if we're gonna punt this to the next meeting to allow people more time to make a different determination and consider new plans, we need to give them some sense of what we're looking for. And I'm not sure we've accomplished that yet, if that's what the goal is.
Agreed. Paul.
So I personally would like to see at least a single space option on site. And while naturally I favor all street parking, I'm also moved by the, I won't say argument, because I think it's a reasoned discussion from those representing the disabled community that there are some significant advantages to being on site. And there are circumstances in which on-site is perhaps the only alternative. So I'm also, I must say, significantly persuaded by the earlier point made by Ned that, you know, we've got a driveway there now. And obviously I've been there, I've walked that site. We did all the things we did about Haywood Benjamin. So realistically, I would like to see an alternative which did in fact provide for at least one space. That's one alternative I'd like to see. The second is I'd like more focus on option 5, which the chair is so taken with, because I don't remember enough detail about it as I sit here tonight to have sufficient focus to say, well, I could support that or couldn't. So while I have, in an ideal world, I'd like to see off-street parking only. However, part of the world, insofar it's going to be ideal for a proportion of our community, is to be able to have on-site parking. And I find that persuasive, and I could be persuaded to support an on-site alternative, so long as not too disruptive to the compromise inevitably we're making to the aesthetics and the interest of the rest of the community, which obviously, to our good and joint fortunes, is not disabled. So nonetheless, that's, I don't want to get too windy here, but I'd like to see option 5 again. I'd like to see whether a 2-space on the street, on Main Street, with a curb cut that allowed for a single on-site space is feasible, or, you know, maybe we'd conclude that's neither fish nor fowl. It's half a loaf. I don't know, but I'd like to see it.
Okay, thank you. Nia.
I would like just something clarified, please. If we are presented with options, for example, the on-street parking with the additional buffer, and we are told that those are bona fide accessible parking spots, and then one of the citizens of Concord is telling us that that does not meet ADA requirements, I am thoroughly confused. How are we supposed to resolve whether these are in fact suitable or they're not suitable?
Yeah, I think Meryl was talking about spaces on the Sudbury Road parking lot. Those may not meet accessibility standards, not these new ones.
I thought she was saying the same thing about the new ones.
No.
I don't think so. I think the new ones technically are ADA compliant. They're not as welcoming as being next to the building, but I think what Meryl was saying was you have to discount the spaces in the Sudbury Road parking lot, correct, Meryl? Because those don't meet accessibility standards at the moment. Does that make sense, Nia?
Yes.
Okay.
Ugh.
So I know we've been at this for a while. I really do think there is an on-site solution, and I'm sorry, Jeff, to make the team go back to examine this again, but I really do think there's a way of striking the balance that this scheme that we're being shown just doesn't do it. This scheme it's sort of the other extreme. It shows all 3 spots when only technically 2 are required. So I think if you're hearing Paul and me at least say that it would be good to see an option that shows 1 or 2 spots on site tightened up. Maybe it pulls the parking toward the street a little more. And I'd love to see the landscape design get a little creative there between the building. Because I'm not, I think I also hear the argument that what's shown here is not really screening the building. It's a little bit diaphanous, if that's the right word.
Okay, well, we'll
So-
take that as some direction. So thanks for all of the comments and the considerations tonight. And this is an important component of the project, and the corporation absolutely supports the best accessible plan that we as a community can put together. And the HDC is a critical component of that. So together with others involved, we'll go back to the drawing board and look forward to speaking with you at a meeting in the near future.
All right, thank you. So we'll continue this, but I do want to acknowledge the input of the community again. I think you can all see we're trying to broker a compromise solution here, and that accessibility and accessible parking is very important to us and to this town. And we are balancing a number of agendas. It's not unusual for commissions and committees in this town to do this. So I appreciate your collective patience, and I appreciate all of our consultants. I can see that poor people from GGD and others have been sitting at this meeting for 2 3/4 hours, and we haven't even allowed you to say anything. So I think I'm going to look for a motion to continue this to our November 5th meeting. Is that right, the next date?
Yeah, and we may need to continue out because of the design time and perhaps more community engagement. But for now, we'll do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Could I get a motion for, I think we've had enough public input. I'm going to look around the room one more time to see if anybody else has anything to say, but I think we've had, I hate to say beating this horse to death because that's a bad analogy, but we kind of have tonight. Could I see a motion from the commission to continue?
I move we continue
I move
the.
that.
Sorry?
Go.
Go ahead, Luis.
I move we continue the application of 129 Main Street, the Concord Free Public Library, to the meeting of November 5th.
And then we'll see if that has to, yeah. Okay,
That's it.
I need a second.
Melinda?
Melinda, all in favor? Paul?
Aye.
Aye. Nia?
Aye.
Melinda? Luis?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And then Catherine?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Abigail?
Aye.
Did I get everybody? I think I did. All right. Well, thank you all.
Hey,
we are-
excuse me, Peter.
Yes,
Heather,
go ahead, Jeff.
Heather, could you confirm the submittal date for the November 5th meeting?
We'd like to have everything the Monday of the meeting week, so it gives the commission a few days to look at everything.
Okay, thank you.
All right, team. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, and library team and board and accessibility committee and fellow citizens. Thank you all for your time and input on this. It's an important
Thank you, everyone.
discussion. All right, you are all free to go. So that was our last public hearing, and given that it's 9:45, I'm going to say we race through whatever other business so Heather can go to bed.
Yeah, if we could
Because-
start with
Yeah.
525 Lexington Road, because he's been here the whole meeting waiting.
Okay, and tell me what this is now. This is a,
So this is 525 Lexington Road. They're requesting an amendment of their approved plans. And that was all outlined. We can walk, the applicant can walk through it, but it was all outlined in your meeting notes.
Right.
So this is Norman from Welling Construction. I'm here.
Hi, Norman.
How you doing? So a couple things changed during construction. There were 4 items, I believe. 2 pertaining to landscaping and 2 pertaining to the house, which on the house is really, I think, more or less clarifications. Heather, is there any way for you to bring up the landscape plan first? So in terms of landscape, if you can just go to page 4 for me, please. I marked it up on what, right here. So this was the plan that had been reviewed at one of the hearings a while ago. I can't see the date at the top, but basically when we got into construction, obviously through the evolution of it, there was some items that the client just didn't feel they liked at the time. One of the items was there was supposed to be this farmer's wall out front, little stone veneer farmer's wall that was never there to begin with, but they were going to add it in where the flat part of the lawn started to slope off. They decided against, they didn't want to install that farmer's wall right away. They do in the future, but they didn't want to right away because of cost reasons and because of the aesthetics of the front yard. They wanted to see more grass. So they did not install that farmer's wall at the very front where you see the 5 steps right there. And then I have a little line pointing, it says stone farm wall removed from scope to be installed in future. So that never got installed. And then there's a stone dust path that I think it's Heather's cursor going around right now. It's just that stone dust path was supposed to go around the perimeter of the grass field right there, which the client ended up not wanting to install as they wanted more grass space in the front yard.
Norman, can I ask a goofy question? How
Yes.
much of this can be seen from the public way?
0.
Okay. So I think what I'd like to do is really just talk about stuff that can be seen from the public way, because otherwise we really, it's not that we don't care, we just don't have.
No, I get it. So the things that can be seen, well, here's the tough part. Is there any way we can pull up the pictures, Heather, of the, maybe we can look at this first. So we'll look at this drawing first. If we look over to the right, there's a railing design. It was a line drawing at the time that the architect came up with. You know, it wasn't fully engineered, and we now have a fully engineered railing design that I will show you pictures of that have been installed on the front of the house. That is similar to what's drawn in these line drawings, but it's a little bit different.
Gotcha.
And then the shutters is the other big thing. So these shutters, they had planned on the whole time on installing shutters on the house. They got to a phase where the front facade was all completely done, all painted, all the trim was on. And the client stood back and looked at it and said that they thought it would clutter up the front of the house too much, and that they would prefer not to install the shutters. So if we can maybe just go to the other plan that with all the photos, there's a package there with a bunch of photos in it. Heather, there was three. Yeah, right there.
It's titled photos. Yeah.
So what I started off with, I put together a bunch of photos. Might take a minute to open. What I started off with is I took a couple photos from standing on the street looking up at the house. So if you're standing down on Lexington Road looking back up at the house, there's really nothing you can see. If you keep scrolling through the photos, you'll see a couple other. It's probably taking a minute to load.
Yeah.
So ultimately on the front of the house, what I'm trying to ask is if we can eliminate not installing the shutters. And I just want to show you the railing, the actual railing design that's installed now on the front of the house, which is in part of these photos.
Sorry, it's just taking forever to load.
That's all right. Seems like everything's taking forever.
I don't know if
Somebody's stepping on the internet cord.
pull it up on their own screen.
What's that?
I don't know if like in the meantime you could everyone could try to look it up on their own screen.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
So there's a bunch of photos.
Is there any particular objection to not putting the shutters on? I don't think it. I think that the renovation looks.
Yeah, if you can go through and look at the photos, you can really see like how the front of the house has come together. Obviously, a temporary driveway is gone now. It's all been put back together. They're just concerned that the shutter is going to clutter up the front of the house too much.
Can I ask for clarification?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the view of the house we're looking at right now?
Essentially,
That's what we see from the public way?
Yeah, see it
Essentially,
back
yes.
there, way back there.
On one of the photos,
Way back, Dennis.
You can't see much.
You can't see anything. Now, did
Yeah, I mean, in the dead of winter, you can see the top of the house, but that's about it.
Yep.
So
Another-
Paul is speaking from the position of authority as the former owner of this house. So we default to what we can see and what we can't see based on.
in the winter, you definitely can see the very top of the house in the winter.
So I personally think we're chasing vapors here. I think you can't see this from the street. So, and frankly, I think it's handsome.
There you go. There's the house right there. And
yeah,
you
but
can
we would
see.
never see this from the public.
No, you would
only
never see
this
any of this.
if we were invited to a party, and
Yeah,
that's unlikely in my case.
You would never see any of it. What I do want to show you, maybe one more picture or slide over to the right. That's the real railing design is ultimately what they're going after.
Okay, but again, we can't really see.
No, you can't see any railings from the street at all, regardless if it's winter or not.
Okay, I mean, I personally think
I think we just go ahead and approve this.
I have no objection to any of the changes.
Just go ahead.
We can't see it. I don't even. Yeah.
All right, so are there any? We don't have public comment here because we're under other business. So could I get a motion to just approve this amendment? Paul, do you want to make the motion since it used to be your house?
Sure. I move that we approve the amendment to the certificate of appropriateness with respect to the property at 525 Lexington Road, and to the specific amendments listed in the application. And do you want me to list those?
No, I think it's
There's
okay.
a lot of them.
As written.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Just as submitted.
As submitted, sorry.
As submitted, sure.
Second.
All in favor? Paul? Mia,
Aye.
Aye. Melinda?
Aye.
Luis? Dennis?
Sure.
Everybody's out of order here. Abby? Catherine? Kate?
Aye.
Thank you for waiting, Norman.
Yeah, no,
Did you
not a
enjoy the
problem.
rest of our meeting, or were you checking your email?
I actually like it. I think it's very interesting. So you guys all do a very good job.
This is one of those bring popcorn meetings.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Thanks for being so thorough, frankly.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Thank you all.
You bet.
Have a good night.
You too. So the only other things, I don't think we have any minutes, Heather.
No.
No. We did have a nice tour of Jenny Dugan. Several of us were there yesterday morning. Matt Anderson Miller gave a great tour. I think we were there an hour and a half, asked a lot of questions. So we're not going to talk about that tonight, but I think we have a lot more context and information, and I think some good ideas about ways forward. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Luis and Kate, were you going to spearhead this for us, or
Right.
Am I misassigning? Luis, you're
Me,
muted.
not.
You're muted, Luis. And I will just say we had some interesting thoughts about how, because we have to essentially pitch this all, not just us, but the neighborhood and all, to the town at town meetings. So the question is, how do you, in my mind, how do you pitch, forget about all the specifics, a new district, and balance homeowner freedoms with maintenance of the neighborhood. But we learned an awful lot about deck homes, or at least I did. So any other thoughts about that before we move on? Paul?
Yeah, I know it's late, but I don't think we ought to forget about what I regard as the sort of threshold discussion, which can be intramural, I mean, just among the commissioners, but I think we ought to be able to articulate why we would be proposing this, and we should understand the pros and cons. So I think that's a corollary, or really a preliminary, to whether we would do something at town meeting. We need to believe in this, and I'm not there yet. I mean, I understand in general why we would want to preserve, but I don't understand the details, the big picture, the context in which we'd be proposing this to the town, the impact on values, the impact on renovation. So I think we shouldn't gloss over that, even though it's a pain in the ass. Take that out of the record, would you please?
Yes, Melinda.
I'd just like to add that I double checked on the new home that a friend of mine built, I think about 20 years ago there. And I was curious as to whether she had torn a house down or whether it was a vacant lot. And in fact, it was a vacant lot. And what our guide said, what was his name again? Was that Matt?
Matt.
Yeah.
Matt, yeah.
Was that he didn't know of any homes that had been torn down there. And so my guess is there have been no homes that now have been torn down.
Okay. Well, what I would say is, Luis and Kate, I think we've got to gather. I think Paul's making exactly the right point. Let's get our ducks in a row first to make sure we're convinced this is a good idea.
Right.
Before we drag everybody else into it. Yes, Luis.
I just want to let Paul know, and that I'm going to be presenting this to Kate at some point, because we have not been able to communicate very efficiently, that that precise argument is being made. And it's being based upon historical information that it's available, you know, in the architectural literature and history. And also it's based especially in the matter of house values and things and resale, et cetera. It's being analyzed as we speak.
Yeah, I understand. I'm not doubting it. I just
we will be able to present a very rational argument, both from a historical and from an aesthetical and from an economical perspective, that having a historic district there, it's a good idea that we should support.
So thank you. And the only reason I do want us to make sure we keep this in mind is that Heather is about to have a baby in December. We have now 3 weeks until our next meeting in November. So not that many meetings. And I know, Heather, you may not get to wrap this up before you go, but it would be great to get as much done as we could. So
Yeah.
whatever you two can do to get us, you know, motivated. And
warrants due in December.
Well, the only good thing is that I believe the select board is going to change the date of town meeting and change all the deadlines for town meeting. So warrant articles probably will not be due in December. They haven't officially changed the dates yet, but hopefully you'll have a couple more months before you have to submit a warrant article.
You're going to get bored anyway. You're going to need something to do while you're home. So sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's not boring.
Oh.
All right. You have all been really great tonight. You're good eggs for sticking with it. I don't think we're going to talk about sustainability guidelines. Is there anything else Heather needed us to talk about tonight? All right. So somebody please make a motion to adjourn so we can all go finish dinner or something.
I move that we adjourn post haste.
All in favor, just raise your hand. Everybody's waving.
Need a second. Who seconded that?
Who seconded it?
I will.
Aye.
Everybody seconded it. You can take your pick. All right, lovely to see you all. Ned, thanks for sticking with us. Heather, thank you.
Smith, hello to you too.
Yes. Oh, I see. Yes, we have 2 audience members. All right, we will see you after the election. Everybody, hold America together. We're gonna make it. We're gonna be okay.
I'll be fine. Don't worry.
Thanks, Peter.